Joining us on the roundtable today, Jerry Agar, of course, the host of the Jerry Agar Show between 9 and noon here on NEWSTALK 1010. Have you got the power out at your house, Jerry?
Yeah, it just went out just a little bit ago.
Was it a huge storm that came through? That people were saying out in the sort of Brampton, and you live a little bit out towards the west, that it was a big storm.
Well, the big storm didn't hit me, but it must have hit one of the generators or something, or transfer stations or something, because I didn't notice a big storm here. I was sort of surprised when the power went out, but it did.
All right. Now, we've decided, since you're on the roundtable today, Jerry, we had to import some new talent to come in here and try and keep up with you and take you on a bit. And the woman I have sitting here with me in the studio, her name is Katie Zeppieri. She's 24 years old. She's the CEO and founder of an organization called Make Your Mark. She is also a multimedia producer, a motivational speaker, a youth mentor, a humanitarian. She's written. Jerry, this is somebody who's just going to make mincemeat of you.
Well, I'm just a talk show host. I don't have a resume like that.
Hi, Jerry.
Hi.
Katie, welcome. And I don't want to create any false expectations. I'm sure you're going to do fine. Especially, and Jerry, by the way, I'll tell you, he sounds like he's a little gruff, but he's really a big softy. Let's talk about the Detroit bankruptcy. Katie, you might have heard me talking about that. And I put it on here not to talk in detail about what happened to Detroit, but to say, do you think, and I'll start with you, Jerry, to get you to steer this up a bit, do you think we are as focused as we need to be on the real state of our own finances and all the things we've promised people when they retire and various other times that we're going to have to pay for?
Well, of course we have to focus on that. And for a long time now, people have been saying, look, you can't continue to grow the size of government past population and inflation, and you can't continue to hand out these great big bonuses. Rather retirement packages. Let's remember that when we started the idea of retirement in Canada, the average age of a male, and that's who the workers were then, was 67 and retirement was 55. Now we've got people who are retiring out of government offices at 55 or 60 and living to 85 or 90. We just literally cannot do this anymore, and everybody in government and the unions and everybody else is just going to have to accept that.
Now, Katie, you're 24 years old, and I often wonder what's in the minds of people like yourself who are out in the world now trying to make your way with a business and so on. You can be honest about this. Jerry and I are of a certain age that puts us in the baby boom generation. Do you think we've kind of screwed things up kind of badly, or maybe just innocently gone out and made promises to people about their pensions and this and that you aren't going to be able to afford to pay for when we're all sitting around retired?
Yeah, to be honest, it can be a little overwhelming and a little bit scary thinking about it and looking at some of the errors that have occurred over the years. I'm from the Durham region, and you look at what happened with the General Motors in Oshawa. And just seeing people who had these great jobs and pensions lined up and these bright futures planned for them, and then they lose their jobs and the economy falls down there and people are worried and afraid. And I think as a young person already, there's so many fears about where am I going to work? What is my employment future going to look like? And just hearing these stories adds so much pressure and stress, I feel, to young people.
I think more people are doing what you're doing, which is actually saying, well, I'm going to try and secure myself against some of that by being self-employed in part, and so that I know I'm the sort of master of my own destiny to that extent.
Absolutely. That's why there's so many great grant programs that we're trying to encourage young people to start their own careers and start their own professions and their own companies because, there's a huge risk factor involved.
All right. We're going to, we'll move on from that. I think the lesson in all of that is that, you hear both Jerry and Katie in their own way saying we better be mindful of the state we're in and not be complacent, even though we read down the road and think it's down the road that they're having problems in Detroit. We've got our own problems here that we have to attend to, and we should not wait until we have to go bankrupt to deal with them. All right. Let me ask you about something else that relates to career choices people are making. Speaking of Katie and self-employment and jobs, I had an interesting item on that came up out of the newspaper. A guy from Facebook in California said that when he stayed at home as a stay-at-home dad for 4 months, he was actually not treated very well by what he called the mommy circles, or what are called mommy circles, but groups of more predominated by women who are looking after kids on a full-time basis. And he said when he went to the park or the playground, he was given these kind of suspicious glances by people because they thought maybe he was hanging around the playground for reasons he shouldn't be. Now, it was kind of interesting because when I put this to the listeners back at 4 o'clock, all the men who called in, I was surprised how many did and said they'd had a stint as a stay-at-home dad, were treated extremely well by women, and there were no wayward glances sent their way. But, Jerry, do you think this is something that we've heard this about elementary teachers, that men almost can't do that anymore because they're immediately sort of held in suspicion if things go wrong or there are rumors or allegations made? Do you think that this is a double standard where men are held in suspicion when they choose to be stay-at-home dads?
Or to work with little children. Yeah, I think I can see both sides of that. I mean, we just had the story recently, John, of the guy who was turned down when he wanted to go into Legoland because they wouldn't let adults, and, if that's the case, maybe it's especially adult males, I don't know, into Legoland with the little children. On the other hand, there have been times when I've been a stay-at-home dad, and I don't know, sometimes women sort of find that attractive when you show up at the playground with the kid. So, I think it can kind of go both ways.
My guess is, Katie, you look at this, again, given your age and where you are in your work life and so on, that you've grown up where everybody seemed to have every choice they wanted, and there was no sort of preconceived notion that a man would do this and a woman would do that, and you work it out. If you're having kids and you work it out, who's best to stay home based on what they want to do and based on how much money they earn and how flexible their job is, but you tell me.
I do see that, but I also think that there's definitely still a stigma associated with stay-at-home dads. I think our society has an idea of what the man's role should be, and usually that centers around a professional career of some sort. But having said that, I think that women still face a stigma as stay-at-home moms, we have so many opportunities now in the feminist movement and, this choice, this independence where why wouldn't you choose to go pursue your career interests? So I do feel that stay-at-home parents in general are very undervalued. My mom stayed home and raised me for 20 years.
As did mine.
Yes. And I just see how valuable that was for me growing up.
So here's a tough one for you. I mean, what do you think of a man, like if you were looking at a man that's in your own age group and, has got married and has kids and he decides as part of that couple's decision that he's going to stay home and look at it? Do you look at a man like that any differently yourself, or do you just say, no, that's just the choice they made. They sort of sorted it out and that's what they did?
Absolutely not. Wouldn't look at him any differently. I think it works for particular couples, and you hear different stories where, some men prefer to stay home and are comfortable taking that sort of role raising the kids. So I think whatever works for the couple and that relationship and what's best for the children ultimately works.
Would you prefer to have a man who wants to go out and earn a big living, or would you prefer to have a man who wants to stay home?
Ooh, Jerry, oh my goodness, we're getting into deep relationship questions here.
You're handling them just fine though, Katie. Yeah,
the boyfriend is listening in intensely right now. I don't think I have a preference. I really don't. As long as somebody is ambitious and wants the most from life and has a good heart, and whatever that means for us in terms of our relationship. If that means that they're going to be dedicated and awesome stay-at-home dad, that's wonderful. Just the same way as if they want to go out in the workforce. I know whatever role works for us, I want to be an active part in my kid's life.
Did you like it, Jerry, when you were doing it?
No.
Seriously not? Like you found it just wasn't fully satisfying? I mean, you love your kids. I know you do. But it wasn't just fully satisfying for you?
No, it wasn't. It was always a situation where I was at home doing things, trying to do some work from home if I had some part-time work, or trying to find work. So when I was home and, walking the kids to school or walking to school to pick them up or doing various things with the kid, it was because I had more availability at the time, but I was actually trying to be employed, and we've made the choice when we can, which has been a good chunk of the time when I have been employed, that my wife can stay home, and she likes it. She likes to be with the kids, and she's better at it, frankly. So it just works out for us better that way.
Well, at least you're admitting that. I mean, that's unusual that a man would do that. Let's move on. I wanted to ask you both, this came from a letter to the National Post, and it arose out of a column yesterday where somebody speculated that Lisa Raitt, who is the new transportation minister in Stephen Harper's government, she's not a new minister, but she's new to that department, that somebody said she might end up being a leadership candidate to become the next prime minister if Stephen Harper were to step down. And somebody then wrote and said, well, she doesn't speak French well at all. And it just raised that question that's been around forever and ever. Should the Prime Minister of Canada in 2013 or beyond, should it be a requirement that they speak French? And I don't just mean a few words, bonjour, and being able to say, how are you feeling, but speak French and be able to communicate to French-speaking Canadians. Katie, I'll start with you. Is that, to you and the way you think about these things at your stage in life, just a natural requirement, or is it not necessary?
It's a tough issue. I know there's so much tradition associated with Canada being a bilingual country. You know, you grow up in schools and you're taught the basics of French, and we give our French teachers one heck of a time. But I think Canada's changing in fundamental ways, and there's a lot of population growth. And, even Stephen Harper in the recent election showed that a party doesn't necessarily have to do extremely well in Quebec in order to have a majority government. So this is speaking to the changes that are happening within our country. And I think a question that we should consider is what happens when another language, say Punjabi or Mandarin, what happens when a higher percentage of people are speaking those languages as opposed to French?
Now, that won't happen for a while because we still do have, I guess, 5 or 6 million people in the country who would say French was their first language, although most of them do speak English. Jerry, is this, should the people just decide and they'll make their decision including factors of how well they speak French, or should this be something where we'd say, look, it's pretty well a job requirement you be able to communicate adequately in French?
There are very few that are actual job requirements in terms of your qualifications to run. I mean, if you meet those very few qualifications and you run, then it's strictly up to the voters. And if Lisa Raitt or anybody else doesn't speak French, then it wouldn't go over well in Quebec. And as Katie has properly pointed out, Harper has now shown that the road to the Prime Minister's office can go around and not through Quebec. And in fact, while you're right, John, there are millions of people who speak French, there aren't that many of them who are unilingual in Quebec in French, and it's less and less all the time. That's why the French language police freak out in Montreal all the time, because they actually know in their heart that their language in terms of business and commerce, across the country and in politics and everywhere else is slowly dying out. We won't go back to having to worry about Mandarin or Punjabi, though, because we didn't make the mistake of setting ourselves up as a multilingual country. We made the mistake of making a bilingual country. It may disappear on its own.
Well, a mistake. Oh, Jerry, you're just getting ready to that. We won't get into that.
Look how much we fight about it. If back of the Plains of Abraham, they would have just said, that's it. Learn to speak English or get out. We'd have actually, in the end, I think, been better off.
Jerry, it's one of the greatest blessings we have in this country because it also causes a lot of kids and adults to be able to speak 2 languages. And I tell you, there's people in Europe that run rings around us where they speak 4 and 5 languages. In Belgium, I think they have 3 official languages.
The shambles and everything. It doesn't actually make the country better. You're better off as a human being if you can speak more than 1 language, but it's not necessary to the running of the country.
I'll let you comment on that, Katie, before we wrap up. What do you think?
I don't know. I think
that was Jerry at his best, by the way. It was.
I appreciate it, Jerry. I think any opportunity to learn a new language is a positive thing. You make an argument that maybe it doesn't help the country per se, and it's more of a personal development, but Canada is seen as a multicultural symbol across the world. I think it's important to promote learning, and part of learning about other cultures is maybe learning a little bit of their languages as well.
All right. Well, on that positive note, we will thank you both. Jerry, I hope the power comes back on soon and that you have a good weekend, a whole weekend, because I think your family's away a whole weekend without power. Call me, okay? You come to my place.
All right, thanks.
Jerry Agar from the Jerry Agar Show, of course, 9 until noon each and every day here on NEWSTALK 1010. Katie Zeppieri, you helped. You know what? You went into the ring in your first boxing match here with the one of the known knockout champions and did very well indeed. So thank you for being with us, and we'll look forward to talking to you again. Katie Zeppieri, who's with us on the round table today, coming up after the news at 6. Another... I was going to say a heavyweight. The other day I called her an ink-stained wretch and had to apologize for that. She's not a heavyweight, but, well, she is a heavyweight. You know what I mean, though. Like, she's a big contender. I'm talking about Christy Blatchford, who will be along after the 6 o'clock news.